Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Laba, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits. Joining me today is Diana Coyle to talk about nonprofits as a abstract, as a philosophy. I'm not quite sure what the title is going to be. We'll figure it out as we go along. But Diana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course, I'm excited to be here and share time with you.
So before we get started, I'm curious to know your superhero origin story.
My superhero origin story is really tied back to growing up. My parents really invested the importance of connectivity to your community. So we were always really involved in different areas, from Girl Scouts to 4-H to being involved in school activities. And it made me realize that there's a lot of people in the world that make nonprofits and community agencies happen. And so I think I always had a calling to be a part of that, whether in a leadership role and wanting to take things on as a volunteer. And then as I traveled that journey, having it really be a part of my career calling and personal identity.
That's really cool, Diana. And maybe if you could also explain then, where you are today. What is your position and what is your role and where do you serve?
I now serve as an executive director for a small community-based nonprofit located in Hamilton County, Indiana. So we sit just north of Indianapolis, and we are Hamilton County Leadership Academy. And our program has been around for about 30 years, and we have over 850 alumni of our program. And we invest and connect in people who want to make a difference where they live, work, and play, and give them the resources in knowledge and in people so that that can be possible.
Awesome. So when we did the pre-show for this podcast episode, we thought about the topic, more of an abstract philosophical topic of nonprofits in general. And I think that was very interesting to me because I find I jump sometimes straight into various topics without looking at nonprofits as a holistic diagram or landscape. And so what I was hoping to discover with you here today was a bit about what that landscape looks like. And I figured we could start by talking about just different kinds of nonprofits that exist in the world today, categorizations of any kind, just to give us that picture so we can then start going into some of those details later on.
Definitely. Initially, when people hear nonprofits, I believe a lot of individuals immediately go into services and agencies who are helping with basic quality of life. So do people have shelter and safety and support and food so that they can live and really thrive? When you look at the scope of what a nonprofit really provides into the community, there is one arm with human services and social services and making sure that people are receiving basic needs and having those things be met. We also can really expand out and look at nonprofits doing work to create a quality of place as well, and look at things like arts and culture where people reside and live, and really look at the ability for nonprofits to aid in connectivity and education and nature. So the irony sometimes in the nonprofit space is there are nonprofits for just about anything someone wants to lean into and build connectivity for themselves where they live or work. It is finding that right space that they can do that and have a mission that aligns with their passion and purpose.
And I'm curious to figure out where the edges are. Like, if I know nonprofits obviously do a lot of great things in the community, and I'm curious to know, how could we define not what aspects they don't cover, because that's a bit of an odd question, but more, where would a need be better served by a for-profit company than it would be by a nonprofit company?
When you are looking at the broad baseline, a lot of experiences and opportunities sit, like you're sharing, in that for-profit, so that private sector, the government sector, and then the nonprofit sector. And a lot of what it looks like is your nonprofits are supporting where there may be a gap in the community for the private and government sector. And so as you look at that, some people really look at nonprofits as a status tied to maybe a tax status or something along those lines. But when you're looking at it as an organization, a nonprofit is really providing a societal benefit or a societal need that isn't being met by that private or government sector. And so a lot of the times it is seen as that third sector next to the government and business side of operations. And the piece there is there's a lot of intersection though, because the government and business will really partner with those nonprofit agencies to meet the needs of the community.
That's exactly what I was hoping for. It is exactly that, the definition of, or the edges. And that leads, of course, because you're right, there's a gray zone between them, and especially if the other two lean on nonprofits for certain services. Like when, I don't want to say when does it make sense to create a nonprofit, because I guess when there is a gap, when there is a need out there, like is that the main driving force? Is it really just about the gaps, or is there something else, something more? It's not a matter of seeing what exists and then saying, hey, wait a minute, this is missing, let's create it as a nonprofit. Is there another angle to that, I guess is the question. Is there another reason to start a nonprofit?
I would say before jumping into the creation of a new nonprofit is really seeing what that intersection is already that exists in the community, that maybe it is more of a collaboration and partnership development than the creation of a whole new service or area to be met. And so I think one of those avenues that is talked about sometimes is maybe an element of need tied to food insecurity. So in an area where there may be food insecurity, government might look at things and say, when it comes to planning and development, where maybe is there a food desert that doesn't have a place and space for people to get groceries or get that need. And so they may look at that in that arm from the planning side of what does that look like for the planning and development and economic development of the area. Whereas someone may look at it from a private sector of what that is too, of where can we come in and be a part of that, versus someone may look at the experience from a nonprofit side and say, okay, we have a population that is needed, maybe tied to the school system. So what nonprofit exists, what is being done in the schools that we can maybe build a partnership so kids can have backpacks and get food on the weekends in a way that we're maybe not creating a new partnership, but we're pulling in the private sector to a nonprofit community where the government may be looking at it from a larger perspective, a higher perspective than just the individualized population that needs that support.
That's a lovely answer. Thank you.
The complexities where people have multiple degrees tied to this topic area as well, and why it's important for people to really dig in and connect with some of the nonprofits that are in their community.
Right. So from that angle, from that perspective, if someone wants to contribute and volunteer with a nonprofit, is there normally a place that they can go to even look for these nonprofits, either in their community or beyond? Like, is there what resources are available for people like myself, for example, who want to volunteer, not quite sure where to or what my skill set would be, where the demand would be, where I could be needed most, for example? Is there any kind of place that you can recommend people start the search and explore the possibility of being a volunteer at a nonprofit?
Definitely. I think one of the great ways is looking at some of the community-based leadership experiences that exist. So similar to what Hamilton County Leadership Academy does, we are bringing in a cohort of individuals who are passionate about giving back to where they live and work and want to expand their knowledge and learn more about the resources and nonprofits and government entities that maybe are doing this work in the community. And so my first thing to recommend is taking a look and seeing if your city or location you reside in, your metro area, has some type of program that is focused on community-based leadership and civic engagement, because that will be a great spot to not just learn about the individual entities that exist, but you're also going to get to intersect with other people who they themselves have a network. So you might not meet someone from a specific nonprofit, but you get talking with someone about a passion area or something that's important to you. Maybe you're talking with someone about a resource in music therapy, and they're able to say, well, we didn't meet someone here, but I know someone who does music therapy and I can connect you. And so that's very much the grassroots way I think a lot of people enter into nonprofits is finding a passion area, having conversations with people in the community, and being able to find who that maybe easy, direct connect might be so that you can identify the next step. But another avenue is some cities and governments have platforms where they are community service platforms, that it's that first access point to see what nonprofits are seeking volunteers to maybe do food distribution. Another great time of year to take a look at nonprofits in your community is around holidays or specific start and end of school times, because usually that's going to bring awareness and timeframes that are high need for the community to really dig in and get people involved and invested in ways that they can share that time, talents, and treasures. And so that's that important piece, is also figuring out how you want to be engaged. Are you wanting to share your time as a boots on the ground volunteer person? Are you wanting to invest and really share the treasures and financials that you may have to give back to the community? Are you someone that in your career pathway, you're a marketing expert and you want to be able to go to a nonprofit and say, I want to help with your social media and marketing and do that in an in-kind way? And so there are a lot of avenues for involvement. And before jumping in for a specific platform to find, I would really encourage people to figure out what is it that I want to do, and then taking a look at your city or town and what resources already might exist. And that's the great thing about, I think, Google and social media and different search engines. It's so easy to type in a topic area and where a city might be to find what may already be a platform there, and then assess who you may know that could be an entry point for you.
There was something you mentioned about skills that caught my attention. And because I would think that the normal process would be I've got certain skill sets. I think they could be useful to a nonprofit. And then when I go to and find these nonprofits that fit and align with my values and I like their mission, I propose this particular set of skill sets or skills. What is your opinion about someone who wants to contribute, but maybe wants to develop skills at the same time? Would working with a nonprofit be a good idea to initiate, develop, cultivate, nurture these kinds of skills? Or do you think it's better spend my time with tech because I can add a lot of value versus I don't know how to, let's say do sewing. And, instead of volunteering at a sewing company or a sewing organization rather, and helping them mend clothing, but I have a kind of an interest to learn sewing. So what would be your opinion about not applying your primary or secondary or even triary skill set, and instead of using it as an opportunity to develop something new in you?
Definitely. That is one of the pieces that does occur in the nonprofit and volunteer sector a lot, is someone may come in very specifically and say, I want to share my skill set that I already know. But other people may say, I do communication or tech work as a part of my 9 to 5, and I want to broaden my knowledge and understand maybe more about the financial operations and being a part of a budget committee or being a part of a policies and procedures committee. And I think that is where each nonprofit and organization may structure a little differently. Some may have direct access and have volunteer requirements to come in and get connected on the baseline and then move into a committee role or move into a board service role. But I definitely think nonprofits are a space that you can use the skill sets you already have, or really start to cultivate the talents that you don't know that you have and that are untapped, or even finding passion areas that you didn't know were important to you. And now you see the impact they can make in an organization, or even have a new creative outlet for yourself.
Yeah, because I can see it as an opportunity to say, I'm using sewing as an example for some reason, but I really want to learn it. I want to contribute. And I guess the passion and the motivation is more important than the level of the skill, right? I mean, I'm sure I could learn it pretty quickly. If I'm interested in learning it, I will. And I can still make a valuable contribution to the nonprofit by doing so. So happy that you said that. I'm also curious then, everything we've talked about so far seems to be finding nonprofits in your local community, like within a drive, of where you live currently. Is there any examples where you can make a valuable contribution to nonprofits that are across the country or in different countries? Or is it more typical, like because you need to be there or might need to be there in person, that you should maybe stick to the local community? Or is it more because it's just a matter of interest, like just because it's chosen to work with local nonprofits, because I want to help the people around me and the community around me versus helping a community outside of my immediate surroundings? I was curious to know your thoughts about that.
Definitely. I would say my work specifically has really been tied to a more localized approach in the nonprofit world. However, when you look at nonprofits, there are some nonprofits that are activated more in, I might call them a little bit of a hub and spoke model of like there is a larger entity that then has chapters that exist in different states and different areas of the country and may serve in unique ways because the way you serve maybe in Indianapolis would look different than how you would provide services in another city or state. And part of that ties to the operations and advocacy. And so I think, too, where you're looking at making an impact, some of your work as you look on a more global scale could lead to a larger impact in advocacy work and bringing awareness. And sometimes it's not serving a community by literally serving them or creating, as you're saying, like the blankets or the needs in that way, but it's serving them by educating and advocating and helping elevate voices and experiences so that people have a baseline of understanding of the needs that may exist. And I would say that may be a initial access point for someone that wants to look at things on a more global scale, is seeing what that learning is that can take place, because the ability to serve a population is really wanting to make sure you're understanding the need of the population, not just to change the population. So how are you doing it in an authentic way and serving the group that needs support in a way that is elevating them, not coming in and feeling like you are savioring them or doing it in a way that is redefining who they are and what they do or anything like that.
And I was curious as well then, is there any particular moment in time in your life or in the volunteer's life where it would make more sense to volunteer? Like I know my dad and my mom, for example, they volunteer because they're retired, they got lots of free time. I know people of all ages do volunteer, but is there any kind of criteria in general where is it like just based on desire, for example, or is there certain moments in life, certain stages or levels of happiness? I'm not even sure. I'm sure there are all kinds of criteria, but is there any what are the attributes that would contribute to someone saying that this is a good moment to volunteer, to be part of a nonprofit?
I would say the understanding of time. When you look at the commitment level, is knowing where that access point is in your availability. So some, it may be a very regular investment in time. Other experiences, it may be several times a month. It may be only once a quarter. And so I would say figuring out what the experience is that is going to meet your available capacity, so to speak. I think one of the phenomenal things that in corporate America that has happened more and in other agencies and work environments is there is a lot more, I think, openness and desire and participation where people may get time each year to go and serve and serve in a way for a nonprofit. And that could be a potential service trip abroad and sharing your time in that way, or it could be very much a localized giving back 8 hours in your community where you work and reside. But the beauty of nonprofit work is it is always support needed. And I think nonprofits, as long as you're coming in with a desire and an understanding of how you can give, they will use your time and use your passion and energy in really rewarding ways. And so defining what that looks like for you is important, and finding agency that is going to fill your bucket and time. And so some people may say, I'm passionate about the arts because of what the arts have given me and provided me. And so I want to find nonprofits that align with that area. Or I know down the road, I would like to do XYZ as a career move. And so could I gain knowledge and capacity and connections through a volunteer experience to get a deeper understanding? And so I don't think there's a right time or a checklist of like, here are the things to complete. Some of that may come with the different levels of involvement and engagement that are available for individuals, but you really can give back in ways that are rewarding to the capacity in which you can give.
It's also can be a highly emotional experience as well. And I'm thinking of the time when I volunteered in San Francisco, and we're going back about 20 years ago at this point, to be a dog walker. This was just after the dot-com burst. I was looking for work. I had applied for like 100 jobs at the time, not a single callback because no one was hiring. Everyone was letting people go. And it was a tough time for me. So I said, you know what, I love animals. Let's try doing this dog walking activity, which I'd never done before. I never had a dog before. I knew I liked dogs, but I mean, the reward, of course, the dogs were happy and we had a great time. But for me, this was like kind of like an emotional support animal in a certain sense, so that, you know, the happiness of the animal made me more cheerful. So that reward is such an important aspect of this. It's not just me giving to the nonprofit, or in this case to the animal my time, but it's also the animal giving me time and giving me attention and giving me something in return. So I want to make sure that's mentioned because it's an important part of that whole volunteering aspect.
It is. And it is where you will cultivate and hopefully maintain or amplify the impact that you can make in the community. But nonprofit work is really one of those avenues of you will invest in experiences and you will grow. And it might not be until maybe a year later that you realize the impact that time and energy had on you, and what you were able to now accomplish because of those experiences and because of giving back into the community. And that's really where that impact of quality of life and quality of place takes shape in the nonprofit world, as you can give back, but you're also bettering your community, bettering yourself, bettering the organization you're volunteering with. And it just grows and continues to fill, hopefully, the cups of others.
And on that note, the cups of others, I know that mentorship is a big part, maybe not a big part, but a part of nonprofits, in the sense of either you can find a mentor, become a mentor for someone else, you know, if you are learning a new skill, like sewing, for example, take my example, you know, I would want to find someone who is someone who can actually sew and teach me along the way. So there's this aspect of mentor and mentorship with nonprofits that I find is very wonderful. I'm curious to know if is that something that is commonly found? Is it precious in that if you do find it, you should definitely take advantage of it? Or is it random where some organizations have it and some don't?
There are some organizations that is the heart of their nonprofit work. And so there are agencies and nonprofits that solely focus on building mentorship in the community. And so where you are becoming a mentor to someone and really focusing in on a population so that they can continue to grow and develop in rewarding ways. The other side of that is, I think, in really organic ways, mentorship does happen in the nonprofit space and allows for people to learn from peers and learn from individuals who have really shaped the community and learn from leaders who are trying to better the world and better the experience for others and model the way of what that looks like and have a kind of leader's heart for passion for making things better from others. And so I think that is the open door sometimes that happens with nonprofit work is there is high empathy and high focus on relationships and giving back to others that sometimes means that there's a mentorship relationship that happens and is maybe a byproduct of the experience and not always the core tenet in which you're going to enter into volunteerism or nonprofit work for, but is an outcome that you may be able to reap because of the time and energy you put into the experience.
So do you think it would make sense to seek that as a mentorship? So I find, for example, I become a mentor in the recent past, and it's a tremendously rewarding experience. It's amazing to see my apprentices, as I call them, grow. And I do it on a professional level and a personal level too. I'm actually doing mentoring now for university students in McGill, my local university here. So there are university students looking for advice on how to be better prepared for post-university in the real world and work. I do that on the personal side, and then the professional side, I've now coached certain students who are Salesforce consultants looking to get better. And I find also that's a tremendously rewarding experience on both accounts. And I'm curious to know, would it be a good idea, or would you recommend, let's say, someone who just wants to be a mentor to work with nonprofits? Or is I've never thought about applying my mentorship ability at a nonprofit, right? To me, it's maybe I'm not there yet, or my mind space isn't there, or I haven't thought about it. But I'm curious to know, if you wanted to be a mentor, would working with a nonprofit be a good idea, or does it make more sense to just continue what I'm doing, kind of thing? I'm looking for personal advice.
No, definitely the personal advice. So this could look different depending on your community. I think even down to what the core tenet of mentorship is. And so I will use myself as an example because I wanted to give back in a unique way to the community I live in. And because I used to work in the higher ed field, I knew there was an opportunity to serve as a mentor for one of the local school districts. And so I have gone down that pathway very specifically because I wanted to serve as a mentor and serve as a resource for someone as they were navigating their next steps in potentially their educational pathway. And so I'll be mentoring a high school student in the area. And so that very much targeted because I knew I wanted to serve in that mentor capacity. That was something that I sought out. And there's organizations that do that very specifically in communities for different populations. And if there's that arm, I think the school district or local boys and girls club or experience to youth mentoring initiatives, a lot of areas do have that. And I think that is the ability for you to figure out how you want to mentor someone. And so I think back to, as I referenced, being involved in Girl Scouts and 4-H. We had volunteer leaders growing up who did it in that way for a very specific skill set that they had that they wanted to share and grow and develop the potential in youth. And so they volunteered in those arms. I think the evolution as you get older and look at populations that might not be tied to youth, it may be harder to find pipelines for mentorship because it might not be as direct as a nonprofit's mission statement to provide mentors for youth in the community, but that it is available in that way and may be taking shape in career areas or individuals who are passionate and have knowledge tied to finances. Nonprofits always may need your expertise and knowledge. And so in an offshoot, you could end up building a mentor relationship with staff members, volunteers in those organizations because you've been able to teach them and have a shared impact in the organization too.
That makes sense. So I need to find a nonprofit then that works with Salesforce, and then I can help them be mentor toward them. This is more of a, as we're going along these questions, I'm also thinking about something that's a bit more outside the lines. And okay, I'll use a personal example because that works. For that, for the dog walking when I did in San Francisco. So I stopped because I ended up moving away from San Francisco. I had to come back to Montreal. And that was the reason why I stopped. But if I was going to remain in San Fran, I would have stayed and continued doing dog walking. And I'm just curious to know, like, or what are the criteria that someone should ask themselves to say, you know what, I'm not really adding any more value to the nonprofit. My contribution has diminished, or obviously my time has diminished, or the other priorities in life. But those are obvious answers. I'm thinking more of I'm not really seeing either the benefits to the community that I'm introducing, or vice versa, that I'm not getting that emotional connection. And like, is there ever a moment where, or what are the criteria, I should say, that a person should say, you know, maybe it's a better use of my time to look either at another nonprofit or just stop contributing toward this nonprofit for a certain period of time, for example?
In the structure, sometimes those are dictated by bylaws and other governing documents if it's more of a formal role. So if someone's sitting on a board experience or they are serving on a committee, that time frame may be finite because of operationally how that is structured and set up. As a volunteer, I think knowing if it is a time to sunset and you're saying, I have been working with this local food pantry for 10 years, and I think I have given my time and energy in a rewarding way, in an impactful way, and I'm ready to find something else to share my time and talents with. I think that's part of the pipeline and the pathways that people travel in the nonprofit sector. And I think that's a little bit of how can you also fill your seat in some sense in that mentor role. So if you are transitioning out, are there others that you can be ambassadors for to fill those volunteer seats if they're needed? But there's also the need to make sure, as you're having this mutually, hopefully beneficial experience as a volunteer, that you are putting in getting a positive buyout from that, whether that's, as you referenced, like you felt great because you were walking the dogs and it was this rewarding experience for you, but you also knew you were doing something good in the community you lived in because there was a need for that support. And I think if you ever are questioning how you are supporting an organization's mission or how you are being able to make an impact as a volunteer, that's when you may need to look at what other avenues are out there. Or I think you reference sometimes it can be a heavy time. And if you're doing work in advocacy, maybe for foster care or looking at food insecurity in areas that it can be heavy, and you may, for your well-being, want to process that with someone else of how can we be solution focused in that way. You may find other avenues to engage in more advocacy work than being hands on the ground serving a community. And so as you're searching for nonprofit work or searching for nonprofit experiences, it's important to know how you can serve in a rewarding way for them, but also know what does that rewarding way look like for you. And it could be that for a period of time, it is very much the hands on the ground and learning more about how you can best serve the community. But then you could end up moving into maybe a board position where you're able to take more of a visionary approach because you now have a deeper understanding of how the operations look and how you can be more efficient and effective and where you could elevate an organization to go down the road and how they can continue to serve the community in even more impactful ways. And I think that's my rose-colored glasses. I never want someone to feel like they're not getting the positive experience from their volunteer work. But it's also okay to sunset and say, I have served my time. I have given, I think, all I can. And been able to reap the rewards from my volunteer life in a rewarding way and sunset and say, I can now go and serve in a different way, or I've been able to leave a really positive mark and make an impact how I wanted to when I stepped into this volunteer life.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a great moment to start questioning. The flip side of that question is, how do you then, as a volunteer, make the most out of your time at the nonprofit? I know that's a very broad question, but I'm curious, like, again, personalize it. Like, I made the most because it was something that was an emotional support that I needed and that I received. And I valued every moment I had with the animals. But a more general approach, as a volunteer, how do you really benefit from your time at a nonprofit? To me, there's a certain element of being mindful here, of just appreciating the moments you have supporting, helping, contributing. But I'm curious to know if you have any other factors or elements that you can think of that where, this is a moment in time where I'm going to be able to volunteer and I really want to make the most out of it. I want to contribute the most. I want to have the biggest impact. And, in order to do that, I can do what?
I would say the first step there is really taking a look at the organization mission, the organization strategic plan, and their values. And so as you're saying yes to a group, making sure you're not off base or not understanding where they are trying to move the organization forward and what the opportunity looks like. Because the exciting thing about being involved in a nonprofit and being a part of a community-based organization that is really looking to enhance the quality of life for the people in their vicinity is that they are looking to the future to say, where is it we want to take this organization in the next 3 to 5 years? And people being able to play a role and be an impact in that way. And so I would really, if you are looking for what that looks like or how to best articulate that, take a look at websites and see what these nonprofits have as strategic plans, or take a look and say, what are they saying this value is? And for Hamilton County Leadership Academy, we have value of community learning and strategic flexibility. And so when we're bringing in people to our cohort, or when we're bringing in our board or committee member volunteers, we are offering that out so that there are beacons of understanding of, this is what you will reap as a part of this experience. We will help you build and connect to the community. We will give you new competency and information so that you can learn and listen with an open mind and create a space of kind of shared connection with your peers. And then we also know as nonprofits, as leaders, we need to be strategically flexible. We're not just going to encourage change for not relevance, but we have very much this change is happening because there's a intentional reason, and we know we need to move forward. And so as you're looking at a nonprofit experience, how are you figuring out what those bucket fill moments are for you? Do you want to create more community impact? Are you someone that wants to be able to share that they've packaged over 1,800 meals in the last year? What are those value points for you in defining what that success looks like?
Awesome. I love it. Okay, this is going to really, really seem like an odd question to end our session, but because we're talking about nonprofits filling in the gaps, can you imagine a future? Is it possible? Is it where there's a future at some point in time where those gaps don't exist anymore, where the need for building and maintaining nonprofits at least is so non-consequential because the private sector and or the government sector has filled in what the nonprofits are doing today, that there isn't a need for it? It's a really, I know this is an odd question, but I'm curious to know your perspective. Like, would that be a good thing? Because in a sense, I would say yes, because that means there's no gaps. Everything's being taken care of as it should be. There's no need for a nonprofit, but maybe you have a different perspective on what is a utopian state look like? Where do nonprofits fit in a utopian state?
The utopian state. This is a great question because I think this almost ties back to where I shared in the beginning. Sometimes the initial go-to of the nonprofit world is saying the social services so that people have food and shelter. and are healthy in those arms. And so if those global pieces are solved in society, I still believe that those aspects of quality of place will still be entities that need nonprofit support, whether that is coming from avenues of community development and avenues of even needing mentorship so that people can have a sense of belonging in the community that they are a part of, or that there is a shared community that's even being offered to where someone resides. I think of things like museums and performing art spaces. Those are nonprofits that are aiding in the quality of place. And I think if we were able to solve a lot of aspects tied to the human services piece of nonprofit work, I still think we would be able to utilize nonprofits that are tied back to kind of those community societal benefits that no matter how utopian it would be, we would still need some of those to create community and create intentional space and place for people. And it could just mean, because I love the aspect of community hubs that nonprofits offer and see those benefits and want those to always be a core element, even as we look to the future in a utopian state.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Awesome. This has been great, Dan. I wasn't quite sure where we were going to go with this, but I love this conversation. It's a great all-arounder. And I'm curious. Well, I'm curious. I'm sure people are curious and would want to get in touch with you, maybe for some follow-up questions. Where can people find you online?
Definitely. So I would love to connect on LinkedIn or any of the pathways. But if you want to connect with me specifically, you can visit me at www.hcla.net. And that is our Hamilton County Leadership Academy website. And my email is on there. And I hope it gives a snapshot into what HCLA is and how community-based organizations are connectors in helping people find places, spaces that they can give and volunteer and share their time and talents.
Awesome. Diana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course, this was wonderful. Thank you for this opportunity. And I hope this inspires someone to take a look and see how they could give back to their community and really make an impact and be a change maker.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.